Now, there's no official comment from the African Union just yet on the event in the United States, but CGTN's Girum Chala has been speaking to some officials there. They say while it is a concern, it's also for the US administration to handle.
There's no official reaction from the African Union as yet, but it's obvious that officials here are not happy with the way the leader of the global power, President Donald Trump, is handling neo-Nazis and white supremacists in the United States. And many say President Trump could have handled the matter better, in this case condemning the extreme and destructive acts seen in Virginia. But the African Union officials also believe this is entirely an internal matter which should be left for the US administration and its people to address. There's also a strong and growing belief here since President Trump took power. The United States is not the only ally Africa has, and Africa cannot depend on what happens in the US to decide its future. Experts tell you, after all, President Trump does not even have a clear policy direction towards Africa. And that is already a put-off for leaders here to hope for a growing tie. Girum Chala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well then, now that of course is a topic that resonates fairly closely with a lot of people on the continent. So let's get some more perspective on that. I'm now joined in our Nairobi studios by Dr. Adam Zalor. He's a political analyst at the University of Nairobi. Thank you for your time, sir. What's your take on this resurgence, as it were, this normalization of white supremacy and white nationalism in the United States?
Well, I think you have to look at it from a global trend in which one is seeing some nationalism arising. If you look at it even from Brexit, from the European Union, Britain saying we want to go nationalist. And therefore you also want to look at it from the American perspective, that where did they come from before the Confederation and the slavery that was there before. And therefore when Trump was campaigning, one saw something like, let's make America great again, and some saw a coded language in terms of we want the America that was there before the Confederation. And if you look at the violence there, then you saw that they were attacking the symbolisms of the Confederation, and therefore the so-called ultra right wing is basically saying it's time for us to express ourselves, to
Let me ask you this, though. Would it be fair and accurate, for that matter, in making this comparison between Donald Trump and his dog whistle statements on racism, like his comments when he launched his campaign saying Mexicans are rapists and murderers and so on and so forth, and guys like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands were basically saying the exact same thing but focusing on a completely different group? But it's the same message, isn't it? That the other party, the other person is dangerous.
There's some form of purism that is coming in, and that purism is what ideologically is usually called fascism, basically saying that we are a pure race and we don't want to be mixed with others. It takes you back to the pre-Second World War period when you had Benito Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Nazi Germany, and basically it was some form of racial purism, and I think unfortunately, unless stopped, that's where
right. So Mr. Trump, obviously, with his press conference a little earlier today, and his not earlier today, earlier this week, and his flip-flopping, he's definitely fueling the fire here. But how do we move on from that point?
Well, basically, I think what one would expect from a head of state would be to be a uniter and basically to condemn what is seen as taking the United States of America back. But what commentators have talked about, and rightly so I would say, is that when you blame both sides, then it looks like you're saying both sides are to blame. You are not condemning the reoccurrence of groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and the like. And that's why he's being blamed, because as the head of state, he's supposed to show direction, show leadership, come out strongly when there is a past which is being revived.
Although, I mean, I should ask you this. I mean, these groups we're talking about, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis. I mean, there was a world war around these issues barely 80 years ago.
Yes.
It's fairly common knowledge, I mean, for lack of a better word, that this sort of ideas are fundamentally stupid. So how is it that we're still in this century, in 2017, struggling with the same problem that was being dealt with in 1939?
Well, those who study world politics will tell you that there is a periodic moment. For example, if you looked at the way big wars were occurring, and they would give you a 60 to 80 year period in which there would be a reoccurrence. Maybe we are looking at that in terms of the old habits recurring. Maybe we just underestimated that they had withered away, but we are coming to the reality that maybe we were wrong, and something needs to be done.
All right, one last question for you, Doctor. So fascism, this insular form of hyper-nationalism that's clearly coming back to the fore yet again. We're seeing it in the United States, we're seeing it in Europe, and these are countries that we have to deal with anyway. So how do we engage from an African perspective? How do you deal with that problem?
Well, basically, the thing is that the world is at one time a global village, but as the trend has shown recently, in what you can call referendums and in elections, we also saw how the right wing in France, although they lost, they made a very strong performance in a very long time.
Ended up in a runoff with Emmanuel Macron.
And those are realities that we have to be alive to. And therefore, from an international perspective and an African perspective, you are seeing Africa torn between the world saying that we are integrating and we're becoming a global village, and at the same time trends in the global world which show an inward looking in terms of nationalism. And I think that that's where Africa has to look inside, because for a time we have talked of African Union, but we have never really been one. The way one can say that as a race, as Africans, that we are one. We've always found ourselves torn in our relationships with the West and the East, from more of a bilateral perspective being stronger than a multilateral perspective. But we also have to look inside ourselves, that you find that civil wars in Africa at times have not been far from such trends. Exactly, and therefore you can't start from a top-down perspective that you want to have an African relationship that is devoid of nationalism and shows globalism, yet in your own internal countries you're showing the same symptoms that, although one can't equate it perfectly with what is happening there, but have all the same symptoms.
So it's basically the same problem, that dealing with the other, for lack of a better word.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Adam Zalor, thank you very much for your time.